Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. I set the table the way my mother taught me, forks to the left, knife and spoon to the right, napkins folded like little sails waiting for wind. The roast chicken hissed softly in its pan, lemon slices catching the kitchen light like coins at the bottom of a fountain. Outside, the evening had the color of old denim, and the first porch lights were flicking on up and down our street. My grandson, Eli, was late by 5 minutes, which meant he'd be right on time in about 2. He's 17 and always orbiting something. Practice, homework, friends, but he promised me dinner tonight. No phones, he said, just us. When he finally knocked, he didn't burst in like usual. He stood in the doorway as if measuring the room for a secret he hadn't decided where to place. His hair still carried the wind from the bike ride over, and his cheeks were pink from the climb. "Smells like home," he said, and I felt that ordinary sentence land in a tender place I didn't expect. I waved him in. He washed his hands without my asking, and bless him, he set out the water glasses with the careful concentration of someone diffusing a tiny bomb. We ate quietly at first. Eli always goes for the wings, so I slid them toward him, and he pretended not to notice I'd done it on purpose. The kitchen clock hummed like a patient chorus. I asked about school. He asked about my garden. We traded small news. The basil had finally forgiven me for overwatering. His math teacher laughed like a startled goose. The neighbor's cat had adopted my porch as if I'd applied for the privilege. Everything ordinary, everything gentle. But there was a thread running through him. I could see it. He picked at the rim of his water glass, turning it slowly, watching the light break into tiny, shivering moons. Every time I asked a simple question, he offered a short answer, then added, "I've been thinking," as if the real sentence came after the comma and kept getting lost on its way. The air felt thick with unasked things. I've learned that with boys, men, too, timing matters more than technique. You can't haul a question out of them like a stuck door. You have to open space and wait. So I told him a story instead, about how his grandfather once burned the potatoes the night before our wedding because he wanted them to taste like camp, and how we ate them anyway with ridiculous joy. Eli laughed and said he could imagine it perfectly. He never knew his grandfather beyond a few photographs and the sound of his name in the house, a bell that rings without being touched. I watched Eli's face loosen, then gather itself again. The thread tightened. "Grandma," he said, finally laying his fork down. He looked at the chicken, then at me, as if anchoring himself to something living. "Can I ask you something that might change things?" His voice was steady, but I heard the edge in it, the one that comes when a person is trying to be brave without making a show of it. "You can ask me anything," I said. It came out calm, though my heart had started a quiet drumbeat beneath the table. I thought of the many kinds of questions that can arrive at a kitchen table, about college, about money, about mistakes, and how to carry them without spilling. I thought of promises made and tried on, like a coat one hopes will fit for years. I folded my napkin to buy him time. He took a breath and studied his hands, the same hands that once clapped for bubbles and now grip handlebars and future plans. The clock hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door thunked shut, and a dog barked once, as if to say it had counted everyone present. Eli nodded to himself, the way you do before stepping off the high rock into the lake. I saw the boy he had been, the man he was becoming, both standing in the same doorway. "What I need to ask," he said, "isn't about school. It's about us, about our family, about where we go from here." He glanced up, searching my face for a sign, and I did what grandmothers do when the world tilts. We steadied the table. I rested my hand near his, not touching, only offering a landing. "Tell me," I said, and the kitchen gathered itself around us like a quiet cathedral. He swallowed, and the smallest tremor ran through his lip. Then he lifted his head and asked a question that split the evening open like ripe fruit, sweet and startling all at once. Eli's question landed between us like a stone dropped in a still pond, sending ripples through the quiet kitchen. For a moment, I could only stare at him. The fork paused halfway to my plate. His eyes searched mine, not with defiance, but with something deeper, an earnest plea for honesty, for grounding. I realized he wasn't testing me. He was trusting me. That realization pressed a weight on my chest, heavy but strangely beautiful. I took a breath and leaned back in my chair, letting the wooden frame creak as if it, too, needed to shift under the moment's gravity. "You've asked something big," I said softly. "And big questions don't scare me. But they do deserve more than quick answers." He nodded, and I saw the relief flicker across his face like a lantern in the dark. He wanted me to meet him here, not brush him aside. The table became our anchor. The roasted chicken sat cooling, its fragrance still strong but unnoticed now. The clock ticked, marking each second with stubborn patience. I could hear Ella's breathing, steady but tense, and my own heart betraying me with its nervous rhythm. I remembered nights when his father, my son, had sat at a different table, asking me questions that shook me just as much. Life, it seems, circles back with questions, each generation carrying them forward until someone dares to answer. "What you asked," I began slowly, "reminds me of something your grandfather once told me. He said the hardest truths are the ones we wait the longest to speak because we're afraid of how they'll be received. But the waiting doesn't make them lighter, it makes them heavier. And the only way to carry them is together." I hadn't planned those words, but they arrived with a force that steadied me. Eli's face softened. He was listening deeply. He sat forward, elbows on the table despite years of me telling him not to. His hands folded tightly, knuckles whitening. "So, you think it's okay that I asked?" His voice wavered, carrying both the boy who used to crawl into my lap with picture books and the young man trying to step into his own name. I reached across the table then, this time letting my hand rest gently over his. His skin was warm, the kind of warmth that spoke of life brimming with unspent energy. "Not only is it okay," I said, "but it tells me something important. It tells me you trust me enough to risk being misunderstood. That's no small thing, Eli. That's love in its bravest form." His shoulders dropped, the tension loosening as if a string had been cut. He exhaled with a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "I was scared you'd be angry. Or disappointed." His eyes glistened, and I saw in them the reflection of my own younger self, afraid, searching, desperate to be accepted by someone who mattered. "Anger?" I shook my head gently. "No, my boy." "Disappointed?" "Never. If anything, I'm proud. Proud that you asked. Proud that you didn't let the weight keep pressing down on you alone. That's how families survive, by speaking even when it's hard." He squeezed my hand, and for a fleeting moment I felt the bridge between us stretch wide and sturdy, built on this simple exchange. The meal around us became background scenery. The true feast was this conversation, this bond renewed and deepened. My throat tightened, not with fear, but with gratitude. Gratitude for this boy, this man, who chose me as the keeper of his unguarded heart. As the night settled deeper outside, Eli finally began to explain why he had asked, his voice low but clear, each word deliberate. I listened, holding his hand, holding my breath, holding the truth of who we were to each other in that fragile, powerful silence. Ila's words tumbled out carefully at first, as though he were unwrapping something fragile. I sat still, letting him take his time, the kitchen light falling softly over his face. His voice carried a mix of hesitation and determination, like a boy stepping into a room he'd never dared to enter before. Every sentence seemed to grow steadier, as if the simple act of speaking his truth gave him strength. I realized, as he spoke, that this wasn't just a question he had been holding in. It was a turning point in his life. And somehow, I had become the person he trusted to hold it with him. That thought filled me with both awe and a trembling sense of responsibility. My role wasn't just to cook him dinner or ask about school. It was to be the place where his fears could land without shattering. The silence between his words wasn't uncomfortable. It was sacred. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the muffled passing of a car outside, the faint rustle of the curtains in the evening breeze. These small sounds stitched the moment together, keeping us grounded while his confession stretched the air. When he paused, I saw his jaw tighten. He looked down at the plate, now abandoned, as if he worried my answer might undo everything he had just risked. That was when I leaned forward and spoke, my own voice steadier than I felt. "Eli," I said, "you don't have to fear my love. It doesn't depend on how easy the questions are or how comfortable the answers feel. My love for you is steady, even when the ground shakes beneath us. What you've shared tonight, it only deepens that." His head lifted slowly, his eyes searching mine, almost disbelieving. Then, like the sun breaking through clouds, I watched his face soften. It was as though he'd been carrying a boulder on his shoulders, and suddenly he could set it down. He whispered, "You mean that?" And I answered without hesitation, "With all that I am." The quiet stretched again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full, alive, like the pause in music, just before the note that changes everything. He reached for his glass, took a sip, and when he set it down, there was a new steadiness in his posture. He wasn't shrinking anymore. He was unfolding. "I was so afraid of losing you if I said it out loud," he admitted. His words struck me deep because I knew that fear. I'd carried it once, years ago, in my own youth, when silence seemed safer than honesty. And now, seeing him wrestle with the same battle, I knew my choice in this moment mattered more than anything. I gave his hand another gentle squeeze and smiled. "You won't lose me. If anything, you've brought us closer. You've trusted me with your heart, and that's a gift I'll never take lightly." He looked at me then with a gaze that carried both gratitude and wonder, as though he hadn't expected the night to end this way. And in that look, I saw the man he was becoming, someone shaped not by fear, but by courage, honesty, and the quiet strength of love received without condition. The clock ticked on, the roast chicken sat forgotten, and the evening folded itself around us like a blanket. I knew in my bones that this dinner would be remembered, not for the food, but for the truth that was spoken, and the bond that held firm when it could have broken. And as we cleared the table together in silence, I felt something shift inside me too, a renewal, a reminder that even in the later seasons of life, moments come along that change us, that remind us what it means to love fully and without fear. The dishes clinked softly as Ela dried while I washed, our movements strangely in sync. For years, I had guided his small hands through chores like these, showing him how to stack plates carefully, how to wipe glasses without streaks. Tonight, he needed no guidance. He moved with quiet confidence, his shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen at the start of dinner. His question had hung like a storm cloud when he first asked it, but now the air felt lighter, as if we had opened a window and let fresh air sweep in. When the last plate was tucked away, we sat again, not because there was more to eat, but because neither of us wanted the evening to end. The kitchen lamp cast a golden circle over us, the rest of the house falling into shadow. It felt like a sanctuary, as if the world beyond those walls could wait until morning. Eli leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. "I didn't think it would feel this way," he said after a moment. "I thought saying it would make everything heavier, but it doesn't. It feels freeing." I nodded, my heart warming at his words. "That's what truth does," I told him. "It doesn't always erase the weight, but it lets you share the carrying. And sometimes that's enough to make it bearable." He gave me a small, almost shy smile. I guess I needed to know if family could be more than just a word. If it could really hold me, even when I'm scared. His honesty pierced me in the gentlest way. I thought of the times in my own life when I had longed for the same reassurance, when I had wondered if the people I loved would still stand beside me after hearing my hidden truths. I reached across the table once more, not with the urgency of before, but with a steady tenderness. "Family isn't perfect, Eli. We stumble, we argue, we fall short, but the love, the real love, doesn't vanish when things get hard. Tonight you showed me you believe in that, and I want you to carry that belief with you, no matter where life takes you." His eyes softened, and for a moment he looked both older and younger than his years, like a man who had crossed a threshold but still carried the openness of the boy he used to be. He whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." The words were simple, but they held everything: gratitude, relief, and something deeper I couldn't quite name. My throat tightened, and I blinked back the tears threatening to spill. "You don't have to thank me," I said gently. "Just promise me this: when life brings you more questions, don't carry them alone. Bring them here. To me, to someone who loves you. That's how we stay strong." He nodded firmly, and in that nod I saw the quiet making of a man, one shaped by courage and honesty, but also by tenderness and trust. The kind of man his grandfather would have been proud of. The kind of man I was proud to sit across from at this table. As the night deepened, Eli stood and hugged me before leaving. It wasn't the quick, distracted embrace of a teenager rushing to the next thing. It was long, deliberate, full of the unspoken understanding that something important had shifted between us. I held him close, memorizing the weight of his arms, the steadiness of his breath, knowing that someday I would look back on this night as one of the rare turning points life offers. When the door finally closed behind him and the house fell quiet, I stayed in the kitchen, hands resting on the table where his had been. The golden circle of light seemed to glow warmer, as if holding the memory for me. I realized then that his question had not only changed him, it had changed me. It reminded me that even in the later chapters of my life, I could still be someone's safe place, someone's answer when the world felt uncertain. I whispered into the silence, "You'll be all right, Eli." And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that he would be. And so would I.